Hi, everybody. Hi there. So, I love gemology. I love my mom. I love my dad. Love my dogs. Love my family. And I wanted to show you guys this because this is a really good example of love. So, I was a caregiver, but I am a caregiver. It's something you don't actually stop doing. And it's very, very difficult to turn off that way of thinking because when you're a caregiver, you're thinking about how to give care 24/7 because you're truly dedicated. And my mom passed. Uh, I feel less like she passed out of something and back into somewhere or back into something like a greater something. I kind of feel more like being here physically was like a stop along the way. Anyways, this was her favorite crystal. And Lynn of Avalon, Plants of Avalon, Lynn of Plants of Avalon, which is a YouTube channel, and Sean of Rambles with My Camera gave my mom this um, years ago, about 7 years ago. And what you can't tell is that actually there's this perfect area to fit your thumb into. And she would hold it like this, and she would feel so good. The reason why I'm making this video today is because one of my fans slash friends encouraged me to do some like honest truth videos. So I'm going to do a series of these, and I promise to look much more glamorous when I do that. But part of being a caregiver is sometimes your patients don't get physically better, and sometimes they do, but it's still their time to move on, like what happened with my mom. And there's some things that you have to do afterwards. And so one of the things that I have to do is I have to throw away our old things. I have to throw away the different things that she bought to try and deal with the frustration that she had being in enclosed environment and the frustration that she had not being able to give me more. There's there's something that you might not know. Sometimes cancer patients have this in common where whatever negative trait or rather a a leading trait that they might have had, maybe like a small habit that they might have had that they might have used to help them get through serious circumstances, they really lean on after they get sick sometimes. Now, my mom and my grandfather both, they absolutely did this, but they also tried to change and they made very big change in themselves. But there are some things that are still or that were still lagging behind. So they made very big changes in the way that they talked to people, the way that they talked about themselves. They've made very big changes in what they focused on. Instead of focusing on lack, they focused on what was there. They became glass full people rather than glass half full or half empty. They were looking and they were saying, even the areas that I cannot see are already full. And I'm just going to spend my time in this world and this life figuring out how. So they got not just positive, but determined. And that's what got them through that illness for so long and so well. Um, Cancer patients do not have it easy like they kind of make it seem. They make it seem like they're in a lot of pain and they don't have it easy physically, but maybe they have absolutely everything handed to them. And the truth is, they really don't. Cancer patients oftentimes just get so ignored, especially the more matured the cancer is. So if you're stage 2, then they're like, we have a fighting chance. If you're stage 3 or stage 4, I've just seen a lot of neglect, and that's not necessarily going to be true for everyone. And I sincerely hope that it's not. But for both my mom and my grandfather, that happened to a very large degree. And so, one of their coping mechanisms that they used to fall on, they fell back on again. And that was looking around them and trying to see how they could change the things around them to be like next level, like kind of trying to upgrade their life within the house. The more they were not able to leave the house, the more they tried to upgrade the house into something that resembled their idea of the ideal, right? So if you can't go out to the rest of the world, you try to bring it inside. And um, sometimes it would be like a fixation because either one of them would be focusing on, well, that's interesting. We ran out of soap again, for instance. Ran out of soap again. Well, let's say that every box has a package of 4 bars of soap, and each soap, then, if it's $5, then each bar of soap would be $1 and some change. But how many pounds is that one package? What if we could price out the price of a pound of soap, melt it down ourselves, and then make the bars? Long story short, I have giant logs or bars of pure soap: coconut soap, goat milk soap, soy soap, palm soap, and that's a really good thing. It's a really enjoyable thing to do, but at the same time, it can be a bit of a burden having to make everything from scratch. And so both of them had that very similar thinking. And it makes sense, really. If you see it from a point of cost and worth, most of the things that you buy are not worth their cost. Whether it's the quality of the materials or the lack of the density of the ingredients in the materials, so it's mostly filler, or it's just lack of the product itself. Most of the time, most products are overpriced. Largely. I'll give you an example. I started making candles a long time too because my mom started making candles a long time too because we lived out in a very cold place and we were constantly losing electricity and there was huge snowstorms and everything. And I'm from Massachusetts anyway, so I was used to that. She was used to that. Everybody was used to that. But there are times when you can't leave your house because you've been completely snowed in. So we started making candles because candles are cheaper. They last longer. There's no batteries that are going to explode over time. There's no cells to recharge in the sunlight. You don't have to use a hand crank. You don't have to store it in a special place somewhere away from the sun, whatever. Candles are very long term. And then the question is, well, do you get beeswax? Do you get soy? Do you get palm? Do you get, and it can go down this long list. You can even get wax made from, I think it's like the wax that the bees who are buzzing around hemp, even, because I know I've seen hemp candles, but that could have also been speaking about the wick or the rope wick, whatever. The point is, that's really awesome, but what it turns into is this belief or this sort of fixation on continually coming to a certain price point. And that's something that honestly, both of my parents and my grandparents on both sides totally shared. Maybe it was passed down. I don't know if it was all nature or nurture, but it definitely existed. And it's something that was totally exacerbated by the cancer before they knew what the cancer was. After both of them, meaning my mom and my grandfather, knew that they had it, their their focus changed to something else, cataloging and refiling so that I wouldn't have to. Specifically, both of them are like this. My grandfather wasn't worried about my Nona or my grandmother having to refile. He was worried that me or one of his sons would have to come and refile. or that I would try to do it. And he didn't want me to have the burden of it. They get obsessed with this idea that they're burdens. So they get obsessed with trying to figure out a way to optimize their burdensome load by trying to figure out a way to optimize themselves. Well, they can't physically optimize themselves, so they emotionally optimize themselves. They mentally and socially optimize themselves. What else can they do? They can optimize the products of their thinking. Whatever it is that they have around them every day, they can try to optimize that, which translates to refiling, to melting candles and soap back down and remaking it, to taking school books apart and putting them in new binders, to reorganizing absolutely everything, to throwing out and rebuying things. Also, then they get worried that you're going to be stuck in a situation where you don't know what to buy. And because they're right, to some extent, we all take somebody, at least a tiny bit, for granted. Sometimes we don't even realize it, and we don't mean to, but there's always something that we don't realize somebody else did, or we don't realize the full extent of how they did it. And, my mom made a lot of lists. My grandfather made a lot of lists. My grandmother, on one side, makes and made a lot of lists. I like list making too, but wow, they beat the pants off of me when it comes to the list making. And so this is another thing that gets exacerbated after they realize that they have the cancer. And it's another way also of making sure that they can continue to help you. So now it's kind of like before people move, how their mindset is already in the new house or the new apartment or the new place. In their head, they're trying to help you from the grave. They're trying to reorganize everything for you from the grave so that you don't have to deal with trying to fix their mess. And they then perceive everything they've done, at least recently, anything they might have messed up now is this huge thing. Everything becomes overblown, and they have this immense feeling of guilt from getting sick. And so when they look at any small mess, suddenly now to them, it seems like, danger, Will Robinson, danger, Will Robinson. We have to fix and burn it all down and build it all back up. And that's also called overkill, going way too far. And that's one of the things about being a caregiver. You're not going to be able to help them fix that feeling of guilt or that feeling of burden because they're magnetizing, or they're not magnetizing, they're magnifying rather their personal feelings of being a burden to themselves against you, and they're thinking that it must be 100,000 billion gajillion whatever fold. And what I don't think they realize in any case is that if they're in a situation where the other person who started taking care of them really, really loves them and really values or realizes for themselves that they really value the time that they're spending together, then the stuff that they're doing when they're spending time together isn't a burden. There was, in the traditional sense, a burden when caring for my mom, but it's more like if you choose to play a video game, then you have the burden of possibly pressing keys, wearing 3D gear, or, not 3D. If you decide to play a game, you have the burden of following the rules or dealing with the consequences of not doing that. That kind of burden. There were some things that were really, really, really hard, but it didn't translate to me as her being a burden. Actually, it translated more and more to me as her being a joy because my self-worth went through the roof. And that was only an opportunity that was afforded to me because my mom allowed me and she didn't try to push me away. And my dad allowed me. He didn't, well, he did it in a little bit in the beginning, then completely stopped because they allowed me to help. If both of them had been like, no, I'm not going to let you help at all, we're going to just move her into a home and see what happens. Frankly, it wouldn't have been very long because most homes are not built for people that are high need. And if you're on enteral feeding, they usually leave it up to you. Although some caregivers that they hire on for different shifts are going to walk in, they're going to go, no, I'm not going to leave you to do that all by yourself. But a lot of times, if you're on a drip feed rather than doing full boluses, a bolus, by the way, means literally, it refers to the word bowl, meaning maybe it's 2 cups of a liquid food and it's put in a large plastic syringe. And it's attached to a tube in your stomach, and you literally push the whole syringe full into your stomach, into this tube, all at once in the space of a minute, 2 minutes. You know, you really, if you're caring for someone, please don't jam it all in there because it's a person and they can feel it. You'll read everywhere that nobody can feel it. Yes, they can. And for the ones who can't physically feel it in their gut, it's because there's different nerve endings that have been so traumatized that basically they can't feel anymore. However, they will have vertigo and they will have intense dizziness and nausea. So they'll still have the side effects of the intense pain without feeling the intense pain directly. And those side effects will trigger pain that will all go back. So the pain isn't going to start here, but it's going to instead start here with the psychological effects, and then it's going to go back down here. Because if you're on a platform that's going around, 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 it's shaking your whole head, right? And you just ate, you're going to get really queasy. You might have cramps. You'll get really nauseous. Your head will feel like, oh, something's, oh man, it just hurts so much, right? You're going to do all that to them if you just shove it in there all in one go. But the point of a bolus is it means literally to take the contents of a bowl of liquid food into a large syringe, plastic syringe about this long. Let me give you an idea of this long. And then usually the nose is about that long. Especially for people who do drip feeding, they have to use syringes that are this long and then the nose is that long. It's called like a long soft tip or bullnose tip feeding syringe. And they have to shove all that liquid from all that bowl directly into their stomach within the space of a minute to 2 minutes. So, getting back on track, one of the reasons why I was always against her going to a home is because we interviewed multiple homes. There's also these facilities that they're homes for the elderly, but they're also called adult daycares. So if you have someone in your family, a family member who's an adult, and the rest of the people in their household can't be with them 24/7, but they do need 24/7 care or to be around people 24/7, which translates to 24/7 care, even if it's more of a psychological thing where they have to be around other people. Whether it's a physical ailment or a psychological ailment, if they have to be medically, it calls for them to be around people 24/7 and they need assistance, and they can sometimes be eligible for something that's called adult daycares. However, adult daycares do not typically perform skilled nursing or there's another thing that I can't remember what it's called, but basically they won't do drip feeding. And drip feeding is when there's a electric machine and it's on It's on an IV pole, and you have these plastic bags. They're about from literally from my collarbones to above my head. They're that tall. They're usually filled halfway to a quarter way with water. And then there's a feed bag that's filled a quarter way with the liquid food. And these two lines either usually come together and join into one spliced plastic line. And that is literally plugged into something that a lot of times they either call your port, or they'll call it your G for gastric tube, or they'll call it your GJ for jejunum tube. The jejunum, and I know I'm not remembering the full terminology right now, but basically, if you have just a gastric feeding tube, it's going straight, kind of think of it like a main line, like a main tap into your stomach. Whereas a GJ or a double J or a J tube is specifically going into the smaller intestines below your stomach. Because a lot of times, because your stomach works almost sort of like a filter, and if you're having trouble processing, or you process very slowly all of the minerals and all the vitamins in your food to the point where it actually curdles and it goes bad and it sits in your stomach before you have a chance to reap the benefits of your food, which only happens in your lower jejunum, then what they'll do is they'll create, especially it depends on if you go to basically like an emergency tech, but they'll create a sort of bypass going from outside of your stomach, unless you go with a surgeon, in which case they actually have to snake it down your nose and they go down. But there is also another way where you can snake it down the throat, and then they go in from here, so they can go in from here, or they can go in through your nose, or sometimes they'll put in oxygen and life support in one nostril, and then they'll actually put the wire with the camera down the other nostril, and they'll have their tools and everything going down your mouth. But there's less of a chance of doing that if you have a a tube or an open stoma for breathing, because a lot of times it's very easy to sort of have complications that way. I don't want to scare people, because there's plenty of people that have the open stoma, or that have family members who are going to be on feeding tubes that stay in the nose. So I'm just describing the difference between if you go to a surgeon versus a type of emergency. They're not called surgeons, but think of it sort of like they're similar to surgery. They're using a lot of the same tools, but they will go in more directly, because the idea is that something has to be done right now, or else you might not survive. Whereas surgeons, they take their time, and they usually are much more invasive, because they'll go in through your nose and snake down, or they'll go in through your mouth and snake down. And it can cause a lot of scar tissue and stuff. Whereas the emergency techs that my mom had to go through the entire time she had the cancer went straight from the outside of her abdomen straight in. And they still had to, they had to really stretch the hole open. So they had to basically re-injure the stoma to opening wide enough so they could fit what looked almost like tongs into her stomach. And they had wires. And the thing is, when they do this, actually, they have you very doped up, but they have you awake, because they work by actually speaking with you the whole time. And they have a sort of privacy screen up, and it's not really a privacy screen. It's for you, so that you don't have to see what they're doing, because it would be bad for you. It would be straight up bad for you. And also, if you start to panic, then it messes things up for them. I just realized it's been 24 minutes. I got to wrap it up. The point is, there's lots of different types of cancer out there. There's lots of different types of cancer survivors out there. And some of those cancer survivors are deciding to be warriors and fighters. And what they might not realize is that all of them are. And what they typically don't know is that they really are pretty incredible, especially, I think, especially the ones who are kind and who are patient and who are loving. They don't realize that they are not a burden and that taking care of them is actually quite a joy. So, if you have anybody in your life right now who is stage 3 or stage 4, I would say there might be some stuff that you have to throw away afterwards. But like I just had this feeling a couple minutes ago, I was feeling like I was going to miss out if I threw out this or that. And then I saw some of her handwriting from when she was on one of the medications, one of the pain medications. And I thought, oh no, I've already missed it. And it's not that I'm gonna miss something, I've already missed something. But that's not true because we made the most of the time together. We really, really did. I wish that I could have helped her see that she wasn't a burden for me. I really hope that she understood that. If you have someone in your life that you love very much that has cancer or something else that requires your full attention 24/7, and you truly do not feel that they are a burden but actually a blessing or a sort of the happiest part of your day, make sure that you figure out the best way to phrase it and just make sure that they know that you're not BSing them so that they don't feel bad because cancer patients get talked down to a lot. Um, some people put them on this high pedestal, and then some other people really talk such shit about cancer patients. It's incredible. And some people are just straight up jealous of what they feel like cancer patients get. They feel like it's some sort of like a bonus, like now that they get all this swag. Um, and to some extent, they do get some different things a little bit more easily than someone who doesn't. But honestly, it's not a trade off. It doesn't make the cancer not happen just because people might give them a little money off of something that they bought or whatever. But it does bring them some joy. And I can honestly say that things like this crystal, gifts that were given out of real friendship uh, and real love, honestly did make my mom's time while she was a cancer fighter 100 times more enjoyable and filled her with such light and happiness. I think in those moments she got it and she understood that she was never a burden and that actually both of us in a weird and slightly tragic way had a gift. Uh, because then she saw how much she was appreciated and she really felt uh, just loved and understood. Try your best if you're taking care of someone to let them know if that's how you feel and if you know that it's a good relationship for yourself and for them. So, anyways, I'm going to let you guys get on to whatever you're doing. And you have a great night tonight, everybody. Keep the faith. And thanks, guys. Bye. Good night.